how do all the cigar, pipe, and even coffee and bourbon reviewers come up with all these flavors and nuances? Stick around and I'll show you what I've learned, as well as some tips and tricks that can help you. Hey everybody, Jeff here, Aromatics. So I was watching a video the other day, a cigar reviewer, and he was kind of calling out someone else on the flavors that they were pulling and describing as being kind of ridiculous, like strawberry shortcake or even barn dust. And it kind of got me thinking that I have been asked on some of my videos, and I've seen it been asked quite a few times on other people's reviews, on where they're coming up with a lot of these flavors when they just don't get the same stuff or anything at all, really. So I thought I would give a little bit of advice from what I've learned from my experience, as well as some other tips and tricks that I've learned. So the first thing we have to remember is that tobacco is a product that's grown from the ground, like the things that we eat, fruits, vegetables, and even stuff that we drink, like say coffee. So it's no wonder, and it's not a surprise, that we are going to sometimes taste other things that might be familiar to us. Say like in cigars and pipe tobacco, things like nuts or cedar and wood, things like that. So don't be surprised. It's not crazy that we're tasting these things. It's a natural phenomenon. So number one, the first step that I would say when trying to pull out flavors from either cigars or pipe tobacco, or even coffee and alcoholic beverages, is to start where you're at. So ask yourself, what am I tasting? So the first time, say, I have ever had a cigar, if it's the only type of cigar, like this is a Padron, so I would just tell myself, well, all I'm tasting is cigar, which is fine. That is what you're tasting. So say you're a pipe smoker. Say you're smoking your pipe, say it's an aromatic, and you're to ask yourself, what am I tasting? If it's an aromatic, maybe you're just thinking, I'm just tasting sweet tobacco. Or it should be easy with an aromatic, because most of them are flavored with a very particular flavoring, like raspberry or cherry or vanilla. So you should be able to pull that out. So start with that. Okay, so number two, and this is the biggest of all, is you need to expand your palate. You need to try different cigars, different tobaccos. It's hard to pull out flavors when you have nothing to compare and to contrast with. So number two is to just try different cigars and different tobaccos. And here I'll give you a good example. So say I'm just used to smoking this Padron. And my description would be, I'm just tasting cigar. So say I'm gonna pick another cigar. So I picked the Camacho Connecticut cigar. So I start smoking that on a regular basis. So these are the two cigars that I'm smoking. And then I can just ask myself, what are the differences between these two cigars, and start with the basics. So just, if you're smoking any two cigars, ask yourself, which one's stronger, which one's milder. So now you can come up with, you've just expanded your palate in a minor way, and that would be strong cigars and mild cigars. So if you were to smoke more cigars, like add a third or fourth or fifth cigar, you can start expanding your range of mild to strong cigars. And so now at least your palate can discern, and a novice should be able to do this, between mild cigars and strong cigars and the spectrum in between. Okay, so let's go the pipe route now. Say you're smoking a pipe and you're used to smoking a aromatic tobacco. So let's say you could add something, and here is an experience from me. When I first started smoking, I smoked the aromatic that say I would smoke would be McClelland's Vanilla Black Cavendish. So if I were to describe it at the time, it would be basically hot air and a little bit of vanilla. That's what I was tasting. So I decided over time, I really want to start, I tried other aromatics and I didn't find much taste in them, so I thought, I'm going to try one of these English blends on the far end of the other spectrum of as heavy as I can get. So I decided to get Dunhill's Nightcap, because at the time that was what was supposedly the strongest tobacco, as far as I could find. So I got the Nightcap, and when I first smoked that, it was like a if I were to describe that, it would just be leather coats. Like I stuck my face, or was chewing on like leather. And although my palate has changed my description of that now, that's what I was tasting before. So now my palate can distinguish between vanilla and hot air and leather. So now I know a little bit more, can describe a little bit more between those tobaccos. So then say I added another smoke, and that would be Presbyterian mixture. So when I smoked that, I started to realize, this is kind of smoky, like nightcap, but at the same time, I'm tasting these hay flavors. Like what's the difference between the nightcap and say the vanilla black Cavendish is this one doesn't have the sweetness, but it has this like hay flavor, which once again, maybe my palate has changed. If I taste it, I might not taste hay, but that's what stood out to me at the time. So that's what I was tasting. So now I have expanded my palate from hot air and sweet vanilla to smoky with a little lighter smoky with a little bit of hay. So I think any novice would be able to pull at least the differences between those three pipe tobacco. All right, so let's expand our palate even further. Let's try a new description. So now you have your two cigars, whether they still be, say the Camacho Triple Maduro and say the Camacho Connecticut. And you can, so say you started smoking these two cigars, and now ask yourself, which one is spicier, which one is creamier? Now at this point, or once you've smoked a little bit longer, you might not consider, say this one to me would be creamier than the Camacho. The Camacho Triple Maduro would be spicier. So, but maybe now I wouldn't consider this necessarily creamy, but it's definitely creamier and less spicy than the Camacho, which maybe you decide later on, once you started smoking, you found spicier cigars, and this is no longer really that spicy, but comparatively, at this point, you're saying creamy, spicy. Okay, so let's try this technique a little bit with pipe tobacco. So say you are just smoking Virginia tobacco. So when someone asks you, what are you tasting? You're just saying, I just taste tobacco. That's all it is to you, because that's all you've ever smoked. You have nothing to compare it to. So say now you get yourself a Burley, I'll just make up one, say Two-Timer by Daughters and Ryan. So now all of a sudden, if someone were to ask you, what's the difference between the Two-Timer and the Virginia? And you might say, well, I'm used to this one pipe tobacco, the Virginia, but now that I've tried this Daughters and Ryan, it's really nutty. So you wouldn't have maybe picked up the nuts before, but now that you have something to compare to, you're tasting the nuts, or that nuttiness or oatiness, say. So say you're smoking the Burley for a long time and you go back to your straight Virginia. Now all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is a sweeter tobacco, so you're picking up a little bit of sweetness, although it's not an aromatic sweetness, but it is sweeter than the Burley. And you might say, I'm also tasting like a hay instead of nuts, or a bready taste, which you might not have thought of before when you were just smoking a straight Virginia. All right, so let's go back to the cigar example and let's expand our palate even further. So now you've got your spectrum of spicy and creamy. Let's break it down as to what kind of spice or what kind of creamy. So let's say you once you started smoking the creamy cigars and the spicy cigars, and you've realized you like, say, the spicy cigars, like I do. Now you're no longer smoking as many of or you're not looking for the creamy cigars, so you start buying cigars that you have been told are spicy cigars. So now you compare those, say the Padron, which is a spicy cigar, to the Camacho Triple Maduro, which is also a fairly spicy cigar. Now the difference, I would say, is this has more of a earth pepper, like a earthy, tingly heat that I can feel on my tongue type of spice, whereas the Camacho Triple Maduro has a dark black pepper. So you might not get that, but you'll definitely notice a difference in the spice. So now you can, maybe it's a chili, like a hot chili, but flavor, or you just feel heat. That's all you know is one of them has a heat, one of them just has a tingle. Let's say that you, instead of liking the spicier cigars, you find that you like the creamy cigars. So you start buying more variety of the creamy cigars, so you can ask yourself what's the difference. So one cigar might be more of a bready taste that you're tasting, whereas the other one you might be getting more of a wood. And at first, if you just smoked creamy cigars your whole, or just a creamy cigar, like just this Connecticut by Camacho, you might be thinking you don't know what you're tasting, what kind of creamy. But once you've tasted another Connecticut style cigar or a creamy cigar, you might decide that, wow, this one has more of a woody taste and not quite as bready as the other one. So now you've just expanded your palate from bready to woody. And you can go on further and further from woody to what kind of wood. Like sometimes you'll taste a cedar type of wood. Sometimes it's just a regular kind of, if you smell like in a wood shop, like someone's cutting wood, or sometimes you'll get an oaky type of smell. And there's all sorts of other flavors that you'll pick up from cigars and pipe tobacco, like hay and tang and leather. But those little nuances, especially like the further you get into those finer points, the longer you have to be smoking, and they take a lot longer to pull out. So another tip is to, if you're really trying to expand your palate, is to start paying attention more. Instead of just smoking and enjoying it, which is fine, but if you want to expand your palate, you have to start thinking about it. So say when I'm drinking a coffee even, I'm just paying attention. Is this just a strong coffee? Is it bitter? And I got to the point now where, one time I was smoking a brand new coffee that I roasted, and I said, man, I swear I'm tasting like pear or some sort of a peach, not peach, but some sort of a light tasting fruit. And then I looked up someone else's review online, and they said this tobacco you might be getting apricot. So I was thinking, wow, that's pretty close to pear. I knew I was getting some sort of a fruit taste, but that comes with paying attention and with a lot of time and comparison and smoking a lot of variety, tasting a lot of variety of coffee, tasting a lot of variety of pipes, pipe tobacco, and cigars. So I hope that has helped you a little bit and gives you at least a start. I think this is a very reasonable way to start trying to pick out flavors and to look for things and to get those fine nuances out of your tobaccos. So I think I'm going to do a video later on what the flavors that I actually pull out, like the common flavors like leather and tang, stone fruits, etc., and break those down, how I taste those and explain those a little better in a later video, as well as maybe some more tips and tricks that you can use to further your adventure in tasting tobaccos, whether it be cigar or pipe, or even expand that out to coffee, adult beverages, etc. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any other tips and tricks that you want to add, put them in the comments. Maybe I'll do that in my next video as well. And if this helped you at all, definitely let me know. I'd love to know. So you guys take care, and I'll see you on my next video. Till then, Aromatics, signing out.